Hello, hello, and welcome everyone to In Time. My name is Nicholas Lamar Souter, and with me today, a very special guest, Anestis Jordangolou. Anesti, how are you?
Good, great to see you, Nick.
Good to see you. It's been too long. We've known each other for probably what, about 20 years? Does that sound about right?
Great friends for 20 years. Yeah,
Yeah, it's good. Yeah,
thank God.
I don't want to. I don't. Yeah, I don't want to give away our age. I think I just doxed you. I apologize for that. Um, So
Sorry.
we are aware of a significant buffering issue. I have some hopes that I can lock that down, so I'm working on it. But I do apologize. I'm going to blame him. That's why we had him on, was so that it's just we can blame him for any technical issues we have with the show. It's never my fault. Um, so before we start, a couple of quick things. There was earlier today, and we've been covering this. And if you want to know more about it, you can come into our Discord just to catch up on the current news. There was a shoot down, I think it was an F-15, from Turkey, shot down an Su-25 over Albania. I said Albania. It was um, maybe it was Albania. I apologize. You know what? I should look that up just before I keep going. Armenia. Sorry, it's over Armenia, and they're arguing over some contested territory, and there's been some skirmishes back and forth. The shoot down, according to Armenia, it was shot down over Armenian soil. The pilot is dead. Armenia has attempted to activate their alliance there. It's sort of their equivalent to NATO. Russia is in this alliance. Russia is presumably, so long as it's in defense, they are required to engage and come to their defense. Turkey is new in NATO, meaning that Turkey ostensibly could call in NATO if they and the shootdown has not been confirmed. So I think it's not big enough. We're going to keep an eye on it. We're going to keep an eye on it on our Discord. We are dropping links to the Discord. Anyone who wants to join, talk there. Also, I want to be in the Discord in the after show. I forgot to offer to Nesty the Discord in the after show if he wants to do that, but that's a we'll talk about it afterwards. That's another thing. But at any rate, so we're also going to be discussing tomorrow generations theory with John Shook. I think that should be a really good show. But in the meantime, once again, Jordangolou, Nesty. So tell us a little bit about yourself,
First, Nick, I just want to help out a little bit with the Turkey-Russia situation and
please.
Armenia. So, because I'm Greek and Turkey has a history, of course, the first genocide were the Turks at the beginning of the 19th century against the population of Armenians, Greeks, and other ethnic minorities in the about 1917 through 1919. Then there was exchange of population 1920, 1921. So I'm sort of kind of aware of like the moves that have occurred in the last 5 or 10 years. And right now, just to let you know, there's a movement back. It's been an open statement by Erdogan about reclaiming the Balkans as a whole. They've made um, some
Oh, that's a
sort
little
of
ambitious.
overtures. It's
Okay.
very ambitious, but it's the restart of the Ottoman Empire. So I don't know if you know. Recently, they took over they remade Hagia Sophia, which was a fifth century, the largest fifth century Orthodox cathedral. That was actually the place where the emissaries of Vladimir of Kiev, they sent them to all these major locations to choose what faith the Russians would ultimately embrace, and they sent them to that fantastic structure of Hagia Sophia. So it was built by Justinian, and that's actually what caused them to convert en masse to Orthodoxy, and that's why the Russians are Orthodox, just because of that particular building. Once the Byzantine Empire fell at 1453 with the sack of Constantinople, which is now the capital of Turkey, Istanbul. I think that's the capital, right? Yes, it is.
Yeah.
What ended up happening was it was converted to a mosque. Years later, under Ataturk, it was turned into a museum again. And so within the last 2 months, it's become a mosque again, and it is meant, according to Greeks and other Orthodox, to be a symbol of the re-rise of the Ottoman Empire, which is it seems to be the direction that Erdogan wants to go. He's outwardly stated it. So it's the fact that it was an Armenian jet, the fact that it was contested territory. They're right now Turkey's in talks actually with Greece. Uh, we don't know what direction it's going to go in, but it's very scary, obviously, for that entire area. So I just want to give you a little feedback on that. But anyway,
That is, we're going to have you back just to discuss that. That's going to be a whole nother, and we've got, oh, and that is, this is your first time here, so we do interviews, we do discussions, we do hangouts, which
sure.
we'll just be talking about, but we also like to keep people apprised of any just the sort of national level breaking news, something that's really big.
Sure.
We tend to cover it
Well,
a lot. All right, well, so and now
anyway,
and then you mentioned orthodoxy, and I think I think a lot of people don't understand. So here's the people who watch the show regularly know that I am an atheist slash anti-theist. This show does have a leaning towards that, but we times. Uh, if every religious person were more like him, I would have so much fewer objections to religion. And we've had a lot of religious discussions, and I found him to be just first of all just a complete joy, always willing to listen to any questions I have. And so that's one of the reasons why I just sort of wanted to have him on to kind of shoot the shit over this stuff. But I didn't understand until you really sort of explained it to me, sort of what the difference was between orthodoxy and the other sort of major Christian religions. So I was hoping you could explain just a little bit about that because you just talked about it, and then tell us a little bit about your religious denomination and how you where you are in your religion, so where you are in your church and what your involvement is, just so people understand who you are a little bit more in the context
sure,
of
of course,
this
yeah,
discussion.
yeah. So I lit up some candles and I have my icon stand behind me, so you get a feel at least for uh, what a what a person who's into Greek Orthodoxy with their prayer area looks like. So the kids and I will pray there once a day, or sometimes we miss, which is awful, but generally that's what we do. And we pray for and so the central okay, so Eastern Orthodoxy was part of the original, sort of the original church, basically, was what it is. And in 1254 there was a split between this kind of like early Christian church into two parts. The Catholic, and there was about 350 million adherents. Um, we're actually There's a lot of people who are converting to Orthodoxy because they enjoy the liturgical life, sort of like the rich spiritual sort of elements that are connected to the church, and also because they like the community. So I mean, of course, every church is different, right? The culture of every. So if you come to my church in Webster, Massachusetts, who has like a very dynamic and wonderful priest, you'll really get a feel of what Christian, I guess, love feels like, because it's totally open, totally caring. You'll be made to feel like you're part of a family immediately, and you'll have I think, kind of an experience of like, oh, this is a good place to be, and so I mean, that's just a general kind of like overview. Historically, it's just like part of the early church. It came from it started with, the apostles and Pentecost, if anybody knows the stories that come from the Old Testament. And then there were other early fathers and mothers of the church that sort of like it spread like wildfire in the Roman Empire. Third century, 325, it was adopted by uh, Constantine and Helen, which actually are the saints of my particular parish. And it became the dominant sort of religion. Previous to that, there had been persecutions that had occurred that were sporadic under the other Caesars, because uh, it was considered to be a threat to the Roman Empire, which is fascinating because it gave rights to women. Um, it understood the slaves to them, believed in a different understanding of what it meant to be a human being. It like understood like immortality as so. If you read Peter Brown's, there's a book by a really famous author named Peter Brown, and he is from Princeton University, and he wrote a book called Body and Society, uh, Sexuality, and the the body in the early Roman world. And so Peter Brown talks about how there was a huge threat to the Roman Empire that relied on having lots of kids for it to maintain its power, right? When the idea of Christ coming again and the importance of purity and chastity and all that kind of stuff, and that your eternity doesn't lie in children, it lies in your sort of your participation in the kingdom of heaven, which it exists on earth today. So, I mean, I'm speaking theologically, so I I'll probably have to kind of like during our conversation, Nick, I guess if you don't mind, if there seems like something that doesn't make a lot of sense, I just want you to kind of stop me. But
Well, and we have a live chat, and they can ask questions because we are unfortunately buffering. There for some reason our stream is not as tight as it could be. So people are probably going to be actually seeing this live about a minute within after us. So they'll kick up some questions. I'll go back and I'll hit you with questions like a minute ago because that's totally fair. Like, remember that thing you said like 5 minutes ago? I'm going to write all this down, and we're going to.
that's fine.
This is called an
That's fine.
ambush, Nesty. Welcome to
No,
In
that's fine.
Time.
I don't mind that at all. But it's difficult, right, to explain an entire history, right?
Oh yeah.
So what you have is you have an ancient church, really, and that's been around for 2,000 years, and it's called Orthodox because it means right belief and right worship, right? So let me give you a framework of what a human being is, right? Just start with that, because if we're really going to make sense of how orthodoxy relates to our modern society, you're going to have to figure out exactly how orthodoxy views the human being, right? We should start with that. So, how do you view the human being, Nick? Let's
How
start
do?
with you.
Well, I'm a materialist,
What's a
so
person about? What
uh,
does it mean to be a person?
oh wow. Thank you for starting. Wow, that's a right out of the gate. Nesty don't play. What does it mean to be a person? I think a person is the sum of all of their genetic material, the sum of how their body has been put together, in conjunction with their life experiences. I would genuinely very much like to believe that there's more than that, but I haven't seen anything that suggests to me that there actually is. And I think it's sort of like we'd all like there to be, but I don't see any evidence of it. So I think we're basically just the sum of our genetics, whatever physical impact we've had, and our experiences, and how we've processed that. I think
Okay.
that's a human being.
Okay. And so I think that's a common understanding of what it means to be a human being, right,
Mm.
in the world today. So, what would make a person like? How would you judge a person in terms of their goodness or badness? In terms of their, I don't want to just say good or bad, but a person that, yeah, let's just use the word good or bad, like a person
Oh,
that. How would you
Well,
kind of
I
claim?
like the words good and bad, and I actually like good and evil. I actually do use the term evil. A lot of people get upset with me for it because they're like, "That's a metaphysical." I don't think it necessarily has to be a metaphysical thing. But so how do I? I think I think good and bad ends up being just sort of much more relative constructs. I'm not sure that. First of all, because I don't think there's necessarily anything metaphysical outside of the cosmos as we understand it.
Mhm.
I think good and bad has to be something that we decide upon as a culture and as a species. I think anything that maximizes the human condition and our ability to live in happiness and peace with each other, and that maximizes human joy is good. Anything that moves us sort of to the left of that scale and reduces it is bad. And I think those are some general. I think there may be other. I think there's a difference between morality and ethics. It's a nuanced difference,
Right.
but I think there is a difference, and I think that ethically we may have other rules that we hope lend towards that by having sort of short-term, maybe ethical rules. Just to give, do you understand? Let me for the audience too, in case the audience hasn't gotten this. So the difference between ethics and morality. A lawyer, for example, may have evidence that their client is guilty, and one might say, well, hey,
Right.
the moral thing to do is to turn that evidence over to the judge. The ethical thing to do would be to not turn it over to the judge because they have agreed in order to be licensed to a code of ethics that lawyers must follow as professionals and so on and so forth. So, and again, those ethics are designed to help lawyers do their jobs, which ultimately, presumably, will maximize. So I think there are some ethical considerations like some places where utilitarianism maybe gets you got to be a little careful with utilitarianism. Would you murder one child to increase it gets difficult, but hopefully that's an answer. Anything that basically moves us towards greater longevity and joy and freedom for human beings is good. Anything that moves us away from that is bad.
Okay. That's great. I mean, I agree. I think that's how that works. So I guess for an Orthodox Christian, so I can't really speak for other Christian groups, and I would say that one of the reasons that the theme of this is, what's wrong with religion, is that I think that quite often we as Orthodox Christians, and certainly as other Christians, do a pretty lousy job of like impressing people with why anybody would want to be involved with it. you know, so I, that's one of the reasons that you know. But anyway,
Yeah, well, we'll get to it, but if you want to finish that, because one thing I am going to ask in a couple of minutes when,
yeah,
when we get to it is just, yeah, what is
sure,
wrong? Why people do appear to be leaving in secularism is
right.
up, and so what is wrong? What is it failing to do? But we'll definitely
We'll get
get
to
there.
that.
Take your time, but it sounds like you
Right.
were on a journey, so let's go there.
So yeah, so the scientific description of a person, right, is Homo sapiens, right, the thinking man. That's what changes us. That's what makes us different than the other beings or primates or whatever it is, right? We tend to think more. We have a certain reasoning capability, and that allows us to do what we do. But for the Orthodox Christian, we're not Homo sapiens, we're Homo adorans, so which means
Ooh,
worshiping man. So
okay.
it's really not so much a question for us as Orthodox about the fact that we think, it's
Hmm.
what we worship. Okay? So when you orient yourself to trying to understand yourself in terms of what it is that you value, what it is that you orient yourself towards, what it is that is most important to you. Once you do that, you can start creating the movement, say, towards, you know, providing greater, having a more just, say, or good society, one that sort of improves the quality of life of others and things like that. So that's sort of like that's sort of the orthodox anthropology, right? And so the scheme, say, is that we suffer on earth. And so there's this mystery of suffering. One time I asked you this question, Nick, that of so how do you account for suffering? Like it's easy for us to be sort of atheists, right? As in a nice house, with wonderful kids and a wife, great family.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
But what about people that are in situations of absolute abject suffering, or that thyroid? How do we account for that? Is that just how do we look towards that as the good, right? So
I'm gonna brag for 1 second, just because we had Skylar Fiction on, and I think you and Skylar would probably get along. And Skylar Fiction is a as an atheist, anti-theist. But I want to brag about one thing. I want to brag about Nesty for 1 second, because he always asks questions that are the exact opposite of everything I've ever. Normally, it's the atheist who asks the theist, "How do you account for suffering?" He's asking me that question. It really threw me. It took a, and he thinks about things. I genuinely, I'm just going to say this is, yes, you did. I remember that. I remember that was a while ago, but I do remember that. I remember that. And it was actually, it was a much harder question than, but I apologize for, just so the audience knows, we're going to get you and Skylar in a room. But at
so,
any
so,
rate, please continue.
so we have to create meaning in our lives, even in the face of absolute and complete suffering, right? So that's why in the Christian experience, so okay, so in terms of it, sort of like a paradigm, right? So we're the praying man, right? So the question is, what do we pray to, right? So if you look at the New Testament and you look at the life of Christ or whatever, it's really interesting. The thing that betrays that which is good or beautiful or true, or it's very hard to come up with something negative about Christ, right? I mean, that's one thing. Even an atheist would like look at the story of Christ's life, and it's like there's not a heck of a lot there that I can really like not like about
They usually have to go to the Old Testament. And I've seen people sort of
That's
try
right.
it with, but you have to square that circle in most cases with Christ. Admittedly, yes.
That's right. So you gotta. It's just really tough. Like the second you get to Christ, right? It's just kind of like okay, all right.
It,
I
it
got
goes
to go
hard, yes.
back to slaughtering the infants and all that kind of stuff, right? That's
Yes, yes,
I can't
yeah.
focus on this guy. Anybody who comes up with the Beatitudes, right? That was one of the great witnesses, right, of truth that Mohandas Gandhi embraced. I don't know if you know that, but the Beatitudes were like eminently powerful for him. So we can say,
I'd
you
forgotten
know,
that, but yeah.
yeah, it's nice.
But
So anyway,
but going along
mhm.
the lines of, though, the problem of religion, which we will get to, but Gandhi had said famously, of course, too, he very much loved Jesus Christ. It was the Christians that he had a
That's
problem
right.
with.
He did. He did say that, and that's.
Yeah,
I think that follows suit, right? So
yeah,
so the Orthodox orientation is. So if you look at the New Testament, we're going to
yeah.
talk about Jesus and all that. What do you have as Judas's primary? So we're looking for, like, say, eternal truth in the scriptures. So Orthodox are a lot different than Protestants because we're not like we don't say that we're biblically based. We say that we wrote the Bible. So it's a very arrogant thing to say. It really pisses off Protestants. No, who have more of a they have more of an understanding of, like, the scriptures as being the center, and then we're saying no, part of our holy tradition, whatever. That's an internal kind of argument that exists amongst Christians, say, right? But if you read that, right, what's Judas's betrayal about, right? It's is betrayal, which is a horrible thing, a kiss on the cheek. That betrayal is about greed. He sells out Christ. And if you want to look at what the majority, so you're looking at this old story, right? Whether you want to, people can get into whether it's myth or whatever, but whatever truth is in there, it's true. Because if you look at the way the world works right now, and really what causes the majority of problems in it, you got to say it's greed. I mean, it's definitely a huge, huge vice, right?
Mm.
Greed and pride and anger and all the things that we see in our in our elected leaders, and in the overclass, and all of that kind of stuff, So that's what people worship. If you worship money, that's what you end up with, and that's why it's so important to have a perspective of the worshiping man versus the thinking man, because your thinking can throw you astray, right? But what it is that you set your heart on, that's really going to be the thing that defines you. That's the thing that makes you who you are, and that's the thing that keeps you accountable too, or keeps us accountable, right? Because if we say, you love your kids, your family, you have a wonderful family, I love your family. You know, I love you too.
Oh,
Okay, so
they love
so
their Uncle Nesty, so that's yeah.
well, that's good. Thanks. So there you go. So that's a wonderful mutuality there.
Oh, they were thrilled
Now,
to find out she'd be
if
on the show tonight too, because
it's nice.
yeah, they were just like he's on the show. Okay, but I was like, I go
So
off
nice.
anyways, please.
Thanks. Oh, by the way, you really, I saw you go up against that sort of like Christian apologist guy, and you had him right. Nick, I got to tell you, I felt bad for the guy, like right from the beginning with your presentation, on
Oh, Hovind.
science versus
Yeah,
holy
Hovind, Kent
mackerel.
Hovind. Oh dear Lord, yes, yes, yes. Don't feel bad for him, but yeah, yeah, that
I was
was.
like, well, no, you didn't know what he got into. Anyway,
Mm,
but in terms of that, when you have an orientation like that, right?
mm.
Then the question for you becomes what it is that you worship. What is it that you're gonna give yourself over to? And for Christians, right, through the ages, that figure, and so again, so you're not worshiping Moses or any of these guys back, but you're worshiping Christ. It's really tough to like find a whole lot of fault in him, right? And so you're looking for meaning, and so you develop a community that understands themselves as living members of the body of Christ, of which Christ is the head, and where there's no longer free man or slave, there's no longer male or female, there's no longer any of the divisions are just brothers and sisters in Christ, right? So you have this like incredible family that orients itself towards what we would consider to be the God man, the person that like God, we call that kenosis, this like outpouring of love that exists from the divine that comes to the earth in the form of Christ to the degree that, and it's such an act of humility that um, that which is eternal and wider than the heavens and beyond, would make himself finite and allow himself to suffer, and so it's like kind of a beautiful. I mean, even I remember someone telling me, uh, I think it's all baloney, and uh, and I just said to him, "Oh, okay, and that's fine. It works. That's what I told him. I don't know why or how. It just works. So my faith works. It does, like the Orthodox faith, at least for us. What is it within you that understands what the difference is between when a Christian is doing something right or wrong? And why would you have a set of standards that you understand for that Christian to begin with that would allow you to make that judgment?"
That's a very good question. I think again it gets back to sort of my own understanding of morality, and I think you can view it through several different prisms. For me, it's kind of a version of enlightened self-interest. The reality that again everybody benefits when we and so this was John Nash in Game Theory, but when he was talking about the prisoner's dilemma and how to maximize sort of outcomes for everybody, it's when we both think of ourselves and work together at the same time. And what I say is that for the most part, I reached that my views on morality through experience and through because children. I agree that children very quickly learn and understand the golden rule. I think this is something you don't even really need to teach them. I think they can learn this intuitively. But I think we needed to learn that in order to survive as a species. One of the reasons we are the dominant species is because we learned morality, and we learned it by the people who committed thievery, the people who committed rape, were kicked out of the society. Their chances for survival died. The chances for everybody else went up. So um, if you were either if you could understand social norms and if you could work with social norms, your chances for survival went up, and nature selected for people who had inherently this ability or for people who didn't have it if they were smarter than everybody else, which is why sociopaths tend to have a higher IQ. It's the only way they could survive as nature actually selected for this instinct that we have.
Got it. So Thievery seems to me to be alive and well. Just look at the way they've constructed laws in this country and use the Social Security fund to buy out corporate debt, which is what they just did with the $2 or $3 trillion tranche, or $1.5 trillion of the $3.5 trillion tranche that you just put out right a couple months ago.
Yep,
And
yep.
rape seems to be quite all right because pornography is one of the largest industries in the country. So it's more popular than all sporting events combined.
I I did not
So
know that, but that does not surprise me either.
absolutely. But I'm gonna. So for me, I think your argument is one that has to do with like uh, what Milan. No, actually, my old roommate Nick Alanopoulos used to call it. The steady. I think Milan Kundera did in one of his books too. It might have been the Book of Laughter and Forgetting, but he understands history as a slow and steady of the human race as a slow and steady progress up. You know, you know, and so you get through the years, right? But
Mm.
I don't, and Orthodox don't. We see history as primarily circular, where people are rediscovering the same sins they had. They're just coming out in a different things. So the only way you can break out of that circular history, things that that we Orthodox Christians, Catholics, and Protestants do, that intuitive sense, that aha moment, because the it is pre-thought. Your instinct is a pre-thought understanding of right and wrong, and the Orthodox understanding of that is called the nous. It's a noetic instinct. It's a spiritual organ of the heart, where the heart and the mind meet. Okay, and it's where awareness of the difference. We call it also that it's sort of it's the place where your conscience resides. And and so the more you orient yourself somehow to God, the clearer and clearer that becomes in you. Now, if you search for truth, and I will say, Nick, Soutter. If there's anyone I know out there that's on a perpetual search for truth, it's definitely you, right? If you're
I try.
searching for truth, right, ultimately, you're going to end up finding a good chunk of that within yourself. If you're not searching for truth, if you're worshiping other things, then you're really not going to find it. And your conscience is going to be clear. And you're going to have whatever addiction you have. For not you, I'm just speaking in
Yeah,
general.
yeah.
That
Well,
person will have
yeah,
whatever
English is
addiction,
poor in that regard.
whatever it
Yeah.
is. So that lack of clarity is going to cause a whole lot of problems for the children that are involved and the spouses, and you're going to see brokenness across the board. And so that search for truth is that connection that exists within you. That's a noetic sense. That's why I think atheists make the best Christians, right? Because they're constantly trying to figure out what's wrong, right? Because when you discover what's wrong, ultimately it ends up taking to a place of what is right. And the second you start honing in on what is right, you got to kind of start figuring that out. So you'll come up with different perspectives that are kind of true, a lot of them, right, about what you indicated about what allows for the survival of species, et cetera, et cetera. The only problem is a little thing called, what we would call, like as Orthodox, we'd say amartia, sin. So what happens is like we discover, you're right, all that stuff happens, that enlightened movement in progress. But you always find huge chunks of the very thing that we claim that we're moving away from existing. So really, it's the truth right until the world, yourself say, and all of my atheist brothers and sisters, right, that understand the difference between right and wrong because they're oriented towards it. Like there's a great. I think I wrote in a little note to you where God is love is also. It's a great. You're a reader of Russian authors, right?
Yes, Russian
Dostoevsky
writers.
and
Yes, yes, yes,
you
yes.
know, so I mean that's your thing, right? It's one of your things. I'm sure you read the short story of Tolstoy's, you know, where God is love is also here. It's also
Actually,
called the Shoemaker story.
I've heard of it, but I actually have not read that one.
So so inside that story, there's a man, okay, and what he is, he's a shoemaker. He lost a son and his wife. It's poor Russia, and he's he's at a loss. He's in complete despair. Someone gives him the a Bible and says, just keep reading this thing over and over again. The New Testament. He feels this great warmth that comes over him, and he says, and he prays, and he says he has a dream one night, and it's Jesus who says, "I'm going to visit you 3 times." And so uh, one time, so he's like, okay, you know, really exciting, you know. The next day, um, he has an old man who comes and visits him. He's an ex-military guy in the Russian army, and he he sees him outside. He's freezing, and he just says, "Come inside. You know, let me warm you up. Let me make you some tea." Gives him his coat, and there's some beautiful lines in it, Nick. You're gonna love it. Like one of them was that have to do with like the human condition, right? One of them is, and the old man wept as he told him his story, as is wont of old men, you know. And it's beautiful because when you do get older, you know, you become more tender again. My dad's 87, and he is the strongest man I know yet. He's so sensitive now at his old age of 87. It's unbelievable, you know. So he's like, that happens. And the next day, a little boy, uh, he's steals an apple, he's not the kid and whatever, and makes up with the shopkeeper and all this kind of stuff, brings the boy in, and you know, tells him, you know, about what the right thing is. And then the third one is a lady with her daughter, and she's freezing too. She only has a shell, and he helps her. And he prays at night as he does, and he goes, "I didn't see you at all," you know, and and he has a dream that night, and he says, "Of course, I visited you the 3 times. You know, those are the people. You know." There's another great story about something like that, right? This idea of the Christ existing, living in the person who searches for truth. So the person who's filled with love, right? There's another great story about that, where there's this Saint John the Merciful. He was one of the emperors of the Byzantine Empire. And so the Byzantine Empire was like fabulously wealthy, you know that, right? So Constantinople was the center of trade and all that kind of stuff. And as a matter of fact, they had to bring in the Crusaders. They only brought them in like 5 at a time, or 10 at a time, groups of 10, to walk them through the empire when they were on the way to the Holy Land, because they were terrified of the barbarians, but they were kind of totally blown away. It might have caused the Fourth Crusade, which was the sacking of Istanbul, Turkey. But anyway, one of these guys, his name was Saint John the Merciful. He was one of the rulers, and so someone came to see him. Some kid. I have heard that this is the greatest of all empires and the richest too. He goes, I would love to see, you know, the wealth of this place, you know, or whatever. Show me what you have, you know. Show me the wonders of Byzantium. And so he said, of course, of course. See me tomorrow. So the next day, at 12 noon, come to the palace. The next day, the king walks to the door, and who is there? The poor, the widow, the orphan. And the king says, these are my treasures. And that particular had social it's like so. That's the kind of orientation I think that solid Christianity, solid Orthodox Christianity, kind of offers up. And I think that's why your daughter, by the way, I'm going to make this kind of personal, said to you, "Where's Grandpa?" And you said, "You're probably not going to see him again." And I said to you, "Why the hell would you say that? She's smarter than you are."
That's right. Oh,
You
dear
gotta say,
Lord.
I'm not sure.
All right. Yeah, that's
I
true.
guess
I said, yeah. All right. Well,
Uncle Anesti says there's a good shot that you'll see him again.
yeah, yeah, that's right. So we sorry for those who were expecting debate coverage. We ended up, but
I'm
I'm
sorry.
still. It's not your fault. I could have checked the
No,
calendar,
that's
but
so.
I'm thrilled to have. I wouldn't change this for anything. So, but we also have had a few questions. First of all, Jake 4D, $2 super chat. Hold the phone. Did he just equate porn to? Did he say grape? I don't know what that may have been a
No,
typo. You equated
yeah,
porn to a prawn. Well, he was on the.
to
So
rape,
it
to rape.
oh, to rape.
It was to rape.
Yes, yes,
Yeah,
yes. Okay, I think that's what I meant to say. So we'll get to that in a second. So we do have two questions for you. So I guess the first one would be, did you? I think you did. So the question, did you deliberately or mean to equate porn and to rape? That's the first question. Second question,
yeah.
and we have three questions. The second question was. Somebody wanted to know if women are allowed on Mount and or if
Athos.
not, yeah, Mount Athos, and if not, why not? And then the
Mm-hmm.
third one pertains to Orthodox versus Catholicism, which is sort of what I'd like to get into, and then we'll go from there. So the first question was equating porn to rape, and the second question was Mount Athos.
So um, I think they're part of the same family. I mean, if they're not, if I'm not going to say people who participate in pornography are don't necessarily do it willingly or not. But I think it's part of the same sort of spiritual family. You know, I think there's a debasement. I think that rape is worse because there's clearly a victim. But I don't. So there's clearly a victim who doesn't want to be um, used. If I want to make sure that people are clear on that. Um, but
So
if you're into porn, I'm not too sure whether you're with your own eyes and your own heart, maybe participating in a way in your own power and your own authority over what you see as degradation on somebody. So there's a maybe that one. Maybe the heart is in both places. One is more active about it than the other. So there's some kind of they're in the same family, in my opinion. That's just my opinion. I mean, that's my church's opinion. I would say.
okay, so I think if I understand correctly, while you're not necessarily suggesting that there is that in porn there is well, so one obvious difference is in rape you have somebody who's being forced into an act against their will. It's obviously a very
That's right.
violent
Yeah,
act, but you do believe that they both are sort of a moral debasement that's in the same family of sort of doing damage to the spirit. I think would that be roughly
yeah. I would say that's spot on. I
all
would
right?
say
So
that
so that's
you
about
you have to ask
six
yourself.
dollars, 6.95
Ask
for
yourself.
my rewriting services, and I can come to I can do this at your church too. Just be like, okay,
Absolutely, come.
what Nesty means is,
So let me help you with that though, just a little bit too, right? When a person's watching pornography, what are they really, why what are they really? Is it purely physical pleasure that they're getting, or is there? I mean, there's an awful lot of violence, right, that exists in pornography. I would imagine. Well, not I imagine that I know about, for sure. So, for that this has to do with role and power, you know, and I think that in that way, it's the same spirit. I just don't see it as some sort of form of liberation. I just don't see it as an act of liberation by, against the mores of a over strict society or anything like that. So, um, so there's violence in both and a participation, and so that's what I'm gonna say. I just don't want. I just want to make sure that I'm clear about that. You know,
so
sorry.
Mount Athos, are women permitted there, and if not, why not?
Oh, that's great. I mean, first of all, congratulations on knowing about Mount Athos. And so I didn't expect anybody to be on that
We
would
have a
know
we have
about
we
Mount
have a we
Athos.
have a. I am proud of this audience. So this is
No, they're not. They're not. And the real reason is because so times, Nick, I'd love for you to go. Um,
I would love to.
and
Yeah, yeah.
and there are convents, right? Of course, in Greece where men are not allowed, right? And there's a convent called Ormelia, which is kind of like the women's version of Athos, right? It's like this unbelievable convent, and they really don't allow for men visitors, right? There's some places like that, right? So I guess at least for Athos, women aren't allowed is because the guys understand what their weaknesses are, and they think that because they live a celibate lifestyle, that it'd be really tough for them for women to go there. They'd like lose their own train track and whatever it is that they don't want the temptation of women, you know.
Yeah, I hadn't
Um,
considered that. I will say this: if you haven't seen a woman in 20 years, I have to believe seeing one could be a shock. I'm
well,
not
I
sure
was
I'm
on a
agreeing
boat.
with
I
the
was on a boat.
policy, but I do see that.
Right. Right.
Yeah.
I was on a boat. I was on a boat from because you have to get to Athos on a boat, right? From Daphne, right? So you go on a boat, you go there, and you're there for a week, and you come back, and like everything's kind of you've just spent so many hours praying and just being in services. I mean, just the hours and hours. And so these guys, I remember coming off the boat with some monks who actually were on their way to Thessalonica because it's not that far from the second largest city of Greece, Thessalonica. And and I mean, there are a lot of beautiful beaches in Greece. Nick, you were in Greece. You know what the beaches are
Oh,
like,
oh,
right?
yeah, yes, sir. Santorini too. The black beaches there, and
Yeah,
with the wine that comes off the lava beach. It's insane. It's good.
yeah.
I love
So would
Greece.
you want to go to a beach that has a whole bunch of boats in it and you know, like, you know, the pollution that comes out of the back of a boat engine and stuff like that? That wouldn't be your
No.
place, right?
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. No,
So
you're definitely.
when we got off that boat, it was just jam packed full of absolutely gorgeous Scandinavian women who all happened to be where the boat was. Now I'm not saying, but like I'm not saying for sure, but man, I got to tell you, one they were there. Who knows? They were just on their way to whatever it was. But you know, all I could think of was those poor monks, man. Their heads went right down to the ground. I mean, they just
I'll bet.
immediately looked
Yeah.
at the ground as they were gone. So I would just say that that story was sort of like probably the reason, you know, that they avert their eyes and things like that. You know, women as like the cause of the fall or anything like that. I want to be clear about that too. Um, it doesn't. It views marriage as a form of sacrament. It's a mystery. It's your opportunity to like participate in God's love.
It's a
Your
mystery.
children. Well, you know, but I mean, your relationship with your wife, right? The love that you have for each other. How the whole is greater than the sum of its parts, right? Sexuality and the sensuality and all that kind of stuff. That's part of marriage, right? That's like in the Orthodox understanding of marriage. That's that's the that's sort of a thing cake, you know. Yeah. So, but anyway, in a nutshell, um, that's the reason why it's kind of hard on those guys. I guess that's really the reason.
so
So they're taking into account their own weakness.
so let me go into I think because we had one more question that I thought was a good question and sort of go into our sort of maybe the final wrap up, guys. It's probably still going to be another 15 minutes on this, but it's the to put to maybe wrap this up in a way or bring it full circle. The final
Sure.
question was, does the Orthodox believe in the Pope, or do the Orthodox, if not, why not? And I will talk about to get back to sort of you had said, I think, especially with the Catholic Church, there are a lot of people who are very upset with the Catholic Church. I am
Mm-hmm.
irrefutably one of them. More than most
Great.
objections that I have to just religion in general, I think. And one of the objections that I tend to use and say this, there's an expression, if you want to left to their own devices, Good men will do good things, bad men will do bad things, but if you want a good man to do bad things, that takes religion. And
Wow.
the idea behind that is that many of the men in the Catholic Church may be good men. Maybe you've got good bishops and good cardinals, but who sit there and say, we are going to protect the reputation of the church because, hey, we speak for God and we have to be able to do God's work here. And so they
Right.
use that, presumably, this is at least in the imagination of most atheists. I suspect there's a lot of truth to it, but in the imagination of most atheists, what they're doing is they are justifying crimes in the name of their God, and we this is the most obvious example. It's the most biggest. Obviously, you already have also said there are a few other ways in which religion is failing to communicate its message, or at least what you think the message should be. So, is there a pope in Orthodoxy, and what sort of makes Orthodoxy different, and why do you think religion is succeed in modern life? If you
The
believe
early
it is,
church
which
had.
I don't want to straw man you there, but
I do.
okay.
I think that well, there's five ancient sees, right, of Christianity. There's Constantinople, Jerusalem, Antioch, Rome, and Alexandria, and there was a split off of those five. The first among equals was the Pope. The other four were equals, but the first among them is sort of like the CEO, I guess, was the Pope. And then what ended up happening was there was a split off from the four and the one because the CEO, decided to be like, like a dictator, I guess. So that was the idea. It's like it's my way or the highway, and that's basically why there was this big break. So there's a number of different patriarchs now that exist. There's one in again, the ancient sees, but there's Russia also has a patriarch, and there's a number of archbishops, and basically there's this big. They're kind of conciliar. They all have their own kind of like. Usually they're based on ethnic grounds now, right? So the the patriarch of Russia just works with Russians. The patriarch of Alexandria is Jerusalem, obviously, So and the ecumenical patriarch, he's kind of like worldwide. Uh, so that's kind of that how that works. So in terms of do we have a pope? We sort of do, but not because our pope isn't allowed. He doesn't have absolute power. He has to answer to the other popes and the other bishops and the other priests, and ultimately to the laity, because the real job of the priest is to be doulos doulon kyrio, the servant of the servants of the Lord. He's supposed to be like Saint John the Merciful I talked about before, whose job is to serve those that need to be served the most. And meaning really comes right from service, right? So it's kind of proven. Harvard did a bunch of studies on service. So we have that ecclesial life. Um, anybody who's a priest or a deacon or whatever, and all they mean is they got to work 5 times harder, trying to love on everybody. That's really their job. So yeah, so that's how that works. The second part, Nick, I'm sorry.
Oh,
There
so
were two more questions.
so to circle it back to how has religion been failing? So most countries, the the level of religiosity is going down. The level of the
That's right.
nuns, people who at least say they don't have a faith, whether they identify as atheists or not, is going up. Many atheists like to champion with this, of course, that for the most part, peace on earth is it tends to be going up. And so, how do you had said earlier that uh, the religious, and obviously that's a big umbrella, but in general, that the religion seems to be having a very difficult time getting its message across. You cited what appear to be some failures. I certainly have some significant objections that make me not just an atheist, but say that I'm actually an anti-theist. That I do, in fact, object to religions that attempt to impart their code on me. I don't mind most.
So, go ahead.
You don't usually, you're not. very imposing. You have your views, but I've always found it's sort of like, well, these are my views, and this is what I'm sharing with you. So, but what that, in my view, that's a rarity. Usually, people are like, no, God is telling you to do this and that, and
Yeah,
in my
right.
view, that's what I object to. So, what is it that you think is the biggest problem right now that people are missing about religion, and that religion is failing to do?
So the thing that a really good religious life offers that is it's failing to, you know, is a worldview and an experience. Um, so it's a worldview that it's the worldview that I offered to you before when I said, we're all like little Christs, with Christ as the head, sort of one of unity and of service and of love. So I can only speak for Christianity, right? Because and primarily for
Oh man,
Orthodox Christianity.
okay. I was going to ask you about paganism, but fine, fine. That's just half my questions out the window.
So it offers that. It offers community. And so if you're not doing a good job living your faith out, you're not going to be good at either one of those two things. So and so it's community. It's an inner life, an active inner life, a better orientation to what really matters, if you want to participate in it, and and an experience, I guess, of the divine. I mean, I know, it's kind of crazy. People say, you know, but really, the reason religion exists, for a lot of us, is because we had an experience, a God experience. Something opened up inside of us. I mean, Protestants call it born again experience. But I mean that kind of like inner awakening that there's something bigger than you are, and that we're not a ultimately Christ, religion's very optimistic about the human person, right? So I mean that's kind of part of it too. So like so what it's not doing is all of those things. It's getting desperate, right? So what happens is it's desperate, and in its desperation it reaches out, and then it judges, and it does all that kind of the stuff that people see that just makes it kind of horrendous for them, I mean, right now, and it's also decided to attach itself to the world, right? To political. So, I'm gonna just tell you about this one guy. He said that his name is Huston Smith, and it's the first book I read was The Religions of the World, and I remember I was so excited about it that I couldn't sit. It was a world religions class, and I couldn't sit in the class. I asked the professor if he didn't mind if I stood and walked while I was taking notes. And I couldn't even read the notes at the end because
I'll
it was
bet.
just scribblers.
Yeah.
I was out of and so Hudson's from MIT, and they had asked him to teach there. He was like a missionary in China, and then he came to this. He was from a real small town there, and he came to the United States. It was overwhelming and unbelievable. And then they asked him to go to MIT, and he goes, "I'm so excited because I'm going to learn everything that is new. Like all that is." The future is here. I guess when he showed up, that was the theme that they had at MIT. The future is here. So what ends up happening is he goes to these classes, to learn himself from philosophers and stuff. He goes, he goes, uh, he says it's the world views, the modern world views. He goes, are so pessimistic. We're not just he goes, we are not just a form of evolved species. Love is not just a chemical reaction. We're not particles that mix, et cetera, et cetera. We're not consumers in a capitalist machine or rebels against systems or beliefs we disagree with. We're instead something different. And he uses a rabbinic saying to describe what it was. And I imagine it was from Christ's time that was, as he was a rabbi. It goes like this: whenever a human being walks down the street, he or she is preceded by a choir of angels crying out, "Make way, make way, make way for the image of God." Uh, Understanding of the human person. And if you train yourself on that and use some of the techniques that exist to train yourself on that, the world looks different. Suffering looks different too. You know, you accept it. You don't get mad with people when they do crappy stuff to you. You know, you just kind of experience life, I think, a little bit differently. Now, I'm not a perfect Christian. I'm kind of a shitty Christian, to you. I just swear. See, I'm kind of a lousy Christian. So there are a lot of Christians that are better. My wife's a better Christian than I am, and my spiritual family in Greece, there's a lot of better. And I think that if we, as Christians, hone in on that, we might not have people join us. That doesn't really matter. But at least they'll experience us. They'll say, it was a better experience that I'm better off now today than minutes with my friend, you know, the Christian, whoever he is, than I was before. Because I can guarantee you this, that Christian, if he's living a life in Christ, is definitely saying that to himself. That is a promise. That Christian, after with the people that he loves, is definitely saying that to himself. And that is always a good thing to know. And I think if our faiths kind of like remember that and live up to that in worship and in love, it's got a shot. But that's a choice, right? You know. Anyway, that's it.
Well,
that's
that, good sir, is why I go. That is why I go to your church for the annual. That's why I'm always. Yep, I
come
always
down for
go.
the festival.
Yes, I come down for the festival every year, and
That's nice. Yeah.
I will say this: you do live that. That's been my experience of you. So, Nesty, thank
All
you
right.
very much for joining us. What I'm
Thanks.
going to do is I'm going to be in the Discord a few minutes after this. Although what I'm going to do after the credits, just stick around for a sec. I would love to just catch up with you for a few minutes, and then I'm going to go meet everybody in the Discord who wants to join us there. There have been a few other questions, and I actually know the answers to some of them, and we can always have you back. So
All right.
we'll
Sure.
would love
Well,
to. But Nesty, thank you very much for joining us. Is
okay.
there anything else that you wanted to just quickly say before we wrap up? Anybody that you want to shout out?
No,
Anything you
just
want to do?
thanks so much for having me, and thanks for anyone who's listening. It's a real honor for me that you would sit in and listen to me. So it's nice. Obviously, I would sit and listen to Nick. I listen to a show, so it's another story. But the come
He's
listening.
listened. He's listened to the couple of drunk nights in college. It's like, oh, Nesty man, you would believe.
But to me, I don't know. So thanks for your forbearance and for your humility and spending a few minutes with me. And uh, it's nice.
Little robot out there, but I think okay. Well, thank you all for joining us. If you liked the show, and if you stayed all the way till now, please like and subscribe. It really does help out the channel. We'll see you guys tomorrow. Generations Theory with John Shook. Night all.